Hello, you're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Ali Milani. Zoe's not with us this week, but we still have a very packed show for you today. Coming up, we will be joined by Professor Ellis Cashmore to discuss the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters ban, and then by Tom Allingham to discuss the rising fees in universities and higher education. As always, you can find us at Politics Uncensored UK on social media, all that and more coming up later in the programme. But first, it's the Week Unwrapped. And this week, we've got Laura Beveridge from Politics Joe joining us. Laura, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you dealing with the chaos that is our politics in this country?
How am I dealing with it day by day?
So what's your what's your routine to get through the week is the question. That's not the actual question. We'll do the first story. The government is facing mounting pressures to strip Prince Andrew of the last of his royal titles in the wake of the Virginia Guffey book release. Will number 10 be forced to get involved? Will Parliament be forced to get involved? And the real question remains as to whether Prince Andrew should still maintain his royal titles. Laura, this seems to be a sort of growing story that broke a couple of days ago with Prince Andrew himself announcing that he's going to stop partaking in his royal duties. What do you make of this whole scandal around Prince Andrew and whether Parliament should or should not get involved?
I mean, obviously he stopped using his Royal Highness title in 2022 during the US civil action that Virginia Giuffre brought forward for sexual assault, but it's only ahead of the publication of this tell-all book published posthumously that Prince Andrew has announced he will stop using his Duke of York title, amongst some others. And I think we forget in this country just sometimes how archaic some of these constitutional things work, and that actually formally for these titles to be removed, it would have to be, it's understood, an act of Parliament to remove it. And I guess this is where you're starting to see some division between MPs, opposition and backbenchers, and number 10 itself. Number 10 said, or the UK government indicated, that it would not introduce legislation to strip Prince Andrew of his titles unless the King wanted it. But we did see Ed Davey yesterday at Prime Minister's Questions asking, will the Prime Minister support a select committee inquiry? This is into the Royal Lodge where Prince Andrew stays, and asked if he would call evidence, including from the current occupant, which is, of course, Prince Andrew. And Keir Starmer indicated that he would do that, but he hasn't given an inch on removing the titles.
What's there to inquire about? Why do we need an inquiry? I mean, we know that, Andrew himself has admitted to having visited Epstein after he was the crimes came out, and I think even he was either convicted or charged in New York. He even stayed in his apartment. He did that horrendous interview that's, I think, a movie was made about as well. And now there's even more allegations and I guess more detail to this story. I guess a lot of people will be watching this on, following the Peter Mandelson story as well, and going, why are the government dragging their heels with this? Why not look at least a little bit stronger than you did with Mandelson and actually take a step and remove his titles? Is it something about the relationship between number 10 and the monarch?
Absolutely. I think it goes back to what I was saying about how strange and archaic some of these things are. I mean, yesterday in the Commons, we had Speaker Lindsay Hoyle refer to Erskine May, which are kind of like the rules that govern the House of Commons. And he was reminding members that criticism shouldn't be made of individual royals in the House of Commons. Oh, really?
Is that a thing?
Yes, unless it's during a substantive motion, which the SNP have brought forward. They've asked for an early day motion where they could debate the substantive issues of Prince Andrew's titles, but he asked no urgent questions, no questions during Prime Minister's Questions. That's why Ed Davey referred to Prince Andrew as the current occupant of the Royal Lodge and not as Prince Andrew himself. And number 10 actually giving a statement that the reason they're not in a rush to bring forward an act to strip Prince Andrew of his titles is because we know the royal family would not want this to take time from other important issues that are being discussed in Parliament, which I think a lot of the British public might think this is quite important.
Yeah. It's it's the most ludicrous thing to think that Charles has sat somewhere going, no, we have really important. You know, Heathrow, the third runway at Heathrow. We can't talk about
the Renters' Rights Bill.
Yeah, that's clearly what's on his mind.
Please don't Section 121 me from Royal Lodge.
There are some moments that I think I'm relatively young still. you're definitely younger than me, that I get this like out-of-body experience with how detached Parliament is from the real world. And one of those recently was I saw a Sun journalist tweet about how one of the Green MPs was wearing trainers in the Commons and how it like brought the entire House into disrepute. At the same time that Number 10 is blocking someone who's been accused of such serious allegations as Prince Andrew and talking like it gives me this out-of-body experience where they're like, the Prince Andrew story isn't important enough to come to the House of Commons, but someone wearing trainers in the House of Commons is like this crime. How important do you think this is in the public? Do you think the public care about this sort of stuff? Or?
I think the public definitely care about this. I mean, the royal family are a symbol of the UK. They hold immense soft cultural power. And like you said, this Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein story has had massive cut through. Like you said, there's been, I think, 2 now dramatizations made of that Emily Maitlis interview. And I think
might be the worst interview of all time.
I think that this has caused existential damage to the crown.
Although, you know, that interview did inspire me to go on like a 3 a.m. doom researching into whether people can actually sweat or not. Do you remember he said, I don't actually sweat, and I was like, no way, this is real.
Well, he says he sweats now. He just didn't sweat.
He didn't sweat
then.
at the time. Yeah.
How convenient.
Okay, now who briefed him? Right. What's not so funny? Obviously, I think we kind of laugh at this to cope. Is if you're a victim of this sort of crime, if you're a survivor, if pretty much I think all women in this country, and you're watching Mandelson get a promotion after his relationship with Epstein was well known, you're seeing Prince Andrew continue to stay in this lodge, multi-million-pound accommodation, even after all this stuff has come out. You're seeing the constant scandals and sexual harassment allegations and stories coming out of Westminster. How do you not, and the grooming gangs story that how do you not lose complete confidence as a woman, as a survivor, as someone who's been victim to this sort of crime, that this country takes this issue seriously?
I mean, I think there's still this pervasive, really quite misogynistic myth that accusations brought against powerful men or can ruin their lives or in their careers, and time again that's just been proven not true. If anything, they're often rewarded or remain in their positions of power. I mean, Prince Andrew just had to step back from public duty, but still gets to live this quite lavish lifestyle of a prince, seemingly without any consequences. So I think it does raise really serious questions over how much are we supporting victims and survivors. Yeah,
and it's not just Prince Andrew. It was Mandelson as well, but also BBC reported that the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, met with Epstein while he was Prime Minister. I think the BBC reported that not long ago. We're going to probably keep talking about this story in the weeks to come. Let's go on to our next item, which is the leadership of your party, soon to be renamed, I imagine. Apparently, your party will only be electing one leader. So there's been significant developments as the Constitution and the founding documents have been released. It's up until now been led by Jeremy Corbyn and Zarah Sultana, although that's questionable. But now the proposal suggests that in 2026 they'll have only one leader and they'll be elected by their members, I believe through a one-member, one-vote system. There's been lots of debate. Laura, you spoke to Zarah Sultana earlier this week. What sense did you get from her about where your party is at? Also, particularly given the momentum that Zach Polanski and the Greens have now, and they are essentially, in my opinion, competing over the same space.
Absolutely. It's no doubt that the public spat we saw between Zarah and Corbyn over membership meant that a lot of that momentum that was behind them then went to the Greens. And I questioned her over the beginning of the party and how could potential voters trust your party, especially given that some of them have had paid twice for membership. And as far as I'm aware, have not yet been refunded for that, even though Zarah promised me that they will be. And
apparently they're struggling to merge the two data sets, which presumably means they're still fighting behind the scenes.
Well, she said that I questioned her on this, and she said that these teething problems are simply, this isn't unique to your party. She said if you look at any insurgent political party, they all have teething problems like this. This is nothing out of the ordinary and it won't affect their trajectory. When I questioned her about that draft guidance and whether there would be co-leaders or a single leader and if that would mean a head-to-head between Zarah and Jeremy, she said that was only draft guidance, that it was subject to change and yet to be confirmed at conference, which is happening later in November.
So she prefers a co-leadership structure over?
She said she preferred the
Right,
co-leadership structure, but if she had to run against Jeremy, she said she'd throw her hat in the ring.
Oh, she would run against Jeremy Corbyn. I wonder who would win in that one. But look, so I think, you know what's really interesting to me about the Green Party membership? So I think they announced yesterday that they've officially doubled their membership since Zach Polanski. If you actually look at a timeline, if you created a graph, the moment that the Your Party spat began is really when the Green Party jumped in membership. And it's clear to me that there was a huge appetite for an alternative on the left in the country, and people almost sat back once Zach Polanski got elected and the Your Party stuff got announced to pick which one that they'd go to. And it's become very clear that they've picked the Green Party given their surge in membership. Is there a world in which both parties can be successful given they're competing over the same space with the same people, do you think? Or is one going to have to usurp the other?
It's interesting. I went to Liverpool where there was a rally for Your Party that Zarah and Jeremy were speaking at. And when Jeremy said that there wouldn't be a formal alliance between themselves and the Greens, and later Zarah laid out to me why that would be, and that's because they have differing stances over NATO, over Israel, and also Zarah and Jeremy say that Your Party is explicitly socialist in a way the Greens are not. I think Zach Polanski might push back on that.
Yeah.
So they're saying that there can never be a formal alliance because of that. But Zarah Sultana did indicate to me that she would perhaps like a different membership model where members of Your Party could also be members of a different political party as well.
I just don't see there is any like water between the two parties in policy, right? I mean, I know they've said that Your Party position would be explicitly no diplomatic relations with Israel, whereas Zach Polanski has been very critical of Israel, has called it a genocide, and been a big proponent of Palestinian rights. But I don't know if he's explicitly said cutting relations. The NATO stuff, I mean, even Zach has said the ideal is to leave NATO, but that's once another European alliance has been put together. I don't know if members are looking at this and seeing any real water between the two. So the conversation I've seen online is that a lot of people are frustrated at Your Party saying, look, Zach has got all the momentum. Why not just join the Green Party and create this big mass movement on the left as opposed to fracturing? So do you think that that's something that's, I guess it's hard for you to quantify. So I will accept if you go, this is a shit question. Is there a world in which Your Party packs it in and goes, Zach's got all the momentum, we join that?
It's interesting because I think especially Jeremy Corbyn has always been able to... Populist is often used in a really negative way, that word populism, but I don't think it necessarily has to be a negative thing. So if you look at it in a positive sense, in the sense that they can drive a lot of momentum behind them, get a lot of people who are disenfranchised re-enfranchised again in voting, Jeremy Corbyn has always been someone that's been able to inspire that. And now we're seeing Zach Polanski being able to do a similar thing. So I think there is a world in which they could come together, whether that is in informal alliances, formal alliances, I don't know, maybe some sort of deal like the Brexit Party and the Conservatives had, where if you field one candidate in this constituency, we won't field another. Maybe something like that could happen.
Yeah, because also I think what's not been spoken about is the threat of reform. And I think minds will probably focus much more closer to a general election when there is a genuine risk of Nigel Farage as Prime Minister and the first extremist government, depending on how you define that, certainly in our lifetimes, that some people may have to put their ego aside, maybe even including the Labour Party, depending on who the leader is then, and say, look, stopping reform is a priority in these various seats. Last question: what was the mood like when you spoke to her?
When I spoke to Zarah?
Yeah, because I would assume that they're quite frustrated and that the sort of momentum that Zach has should be theirs. Right, because when they launched initially, 800,000 people signed up. Right, do we know their membership number now? They've not released it, have they?
No, I don't think so.
Presumably, that's either because they haven't merged the two things, or that number's not a very high number. Right, otherwise you would assume that they've released it. Did she give you like a buoyant mood, or was it more of a we need to fix this?
I think it was buoyant. I think it was forward-looking. I think both Zarah and Jeremy are incredibly keen to leave behind what happened over the membership debate in the past, and I think they are looking forward to conference, but I think there is just still so many questions to be answered, and honestly it's quite hard to talk to them about policy and what the party is going to look like before conference, because it's so democratic. Everything needs to be member decided, and nothing's been decided yet.
We'll keep an eye on that. I am fascinated to know who would win that leadership battle if it was amongst the Your Party membership between Zarah and Jeremy, and I'm also interested into what they're going to name the party, because I don't think it'll end up being Your Party, right?
I don't think so.
Surely
but
not.
it's known as it now. It might stick.
Well, you know what? I said this on this show before. I said I don't see the comms value in establishing a brand with the explicit intent of changing it down the road, because now everybody just knows that it's your party, and then you're going to have to spend another 6 months establishing your own position. But we'll see. We'll see. Our last story of the day is, I'm going to try and get this pronunciation right. Folks in Wales, forgive me, don't at me. Caerphilly?
Yeah.
Is that right? There we go. In a historic turn of events, Ali has been able to announce and pronounce Caerphilly correctly, and expectations are now looking low for the Labour Party in Caerphilly. As the past stronghold for the last 26 years, the by-election looms. Voters are talking of switching their alliances. This is a seat, I don't think in its current iteration, but Labour in this seat has held it for at least, I think, 100 years or so. The by-elections today, looks like Labour are going to lose. Reform might win. Laura, you were in Caerphilly this week. What did you see? What did you make of it? How is Wales doing?
I mean, I don't think I've ever been to cover a by-election, especially a by-election for a devolved parliament. It's been quite so invigorated and engaged.
Nice.
Almost everyone I spoke to had an extremely strong opinion one way or the other. Businesses had all taken a stance as well. We went into a jeweller's that had made a brooch for Nigel Farage when he had visited. Yeah, they made a brooch for him as a welcome gift.
Jewelers love him, isn't he? He's getting like £900,000 to be a brand ambassador for a gold company. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I was actually at Reform Conference, and they were one of the sponsors.
Of course they were. I've never been given £900,000. By the way, if you're listening and you're a gold company, hit me up. How is it breaking? So you're talking to lots of people, very, businesses, people were up for it. I always think gut feeling of when you go out there gives you a good indication. How will people break it?
It's kind of hard because I went to cover the Scottish parliamentary by-election in Rutherglen and Hamilton, and it was the same story where you had the two front runners and all the polls were Reform and then the independence parties. In Scotland, that's the SNP. In Wales, it was Plaid Cymru. And it really looked like it was going to be, and it looks like in Caerphilly too, a battle between those two parties, with Reform maybe slightly taking it. But then in Scotland, Labour came through the back. They were in third place and they won the seat. And when I was speaking to the Reform candidate, Llŷr Powell, I said, is this, now just a two-horse race, and will it be a two-horse race in the May elections at the Senedd? And he said, we can't rule out that Labour vote, and these are towns where people have voted Labour for generations. And he said, I think what we might actually have is a silent Labour majority, but we just can't know until the polling day.
What do they call it? I don't think Labour will get a majority, but it'll be a plurality, right? So everyone's on like 20, and someone pips it with a couple of votes. So Labour aren't out of it is essentially what the feeling was, or at least what the Reform candidate was saying.
It was very, I think, like you said, it was just very, very plural. I mean, we met lots of Plaid Cymru voters who wanted, sort of progressive, welcoming Wales, where Wales would be put first, because obviously they have that independent slant to them, and a lot of them were former Labour voters. But then we also met a lot of Reform voters who, again, were former Labour voters.
Former Labour voters, okay. Because people think that all of Reform voters are former Tory voters, right? That's not the case. Absolutely not.
Yeah. I've met so many Reform voters who are former Labour voters, including in the 2019 general election when they voted for Jeremy Corbyn, because I think a lot of them are voting for change. And like Jeremy Corbyn promised in 2019 that he ran on that message of change, reform. That's what Reform are running on today.
Yeah, I want to ask you about what the implications might be for Keir Starmer if Labour lose this for the first time in like 100 years. Number 10 will say party of government always struggles in by-elections. That's true. But Labour's polling is at historic lows. I think one poll had them third, tied with the Greens, which is a historic low, the lowest the party's polled for generations, if not since polling began. I think it was on 15%, and then losing a seat that you've held for 100 years. Have you ever seen that meme, that Simpsons meme, where Bart says to Homer, "It's the worst day of my life," and he goes, "It's the worst day of your life so far."
Yeah.
That feels like where the Labour Party is. Yeah. When you think it can't get worse, it does.
I think what's happening in Caerphilly, and also Wales in general, you can't just look at it as a consequence of the last year of Labour government. What the decline of Labour in Wales, and also the rise of Labour in Wales, is inherently tied to its industry, its union history, and this decline in the Labour vote is part of a much longer trend. If you look back into the 1960s, 1966 general election, Caerphilly, 74% of the vote goes to Labour. In 2024, 38% of the vote goes to Labour, and pretty much in every election, between 1966 and 2024, the Labour vote was decreasing. So this is a much, much bigger story.
Oh, so it's like a long trajectory down. And is that happening across Wales as well?
Yeah, it's happening across all of Wales pretty much, yeah.
And so, I guess I don't know anything about Wales, but I guess my gut didn't expect reform to do that well in Wales, but this could be something that's picked up elsewhere as well.
I think so. I think the parliamentary elections next year in both Scotland and Wales, especially because in Scotland there's a partial PR system, which means that reform can pick up quite a lot of votes. They do much better in PR than first past the post elections, and it will be quite telling for what's to come.
Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us for the Week Unwrapped. You have been brilliant. I really hope that you'll find time to come back on the show, especially when Zoe is back with us. That's it for the Week Unwrapped. Coming up next, we'll be speaking to Professor Ellis Cashmore about the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters ban. Thank you to Laura Beveridge from Politics Show. Stay tuned. We'll be back with you after this. Welcome back. You're listening to Politics Uncensored with me, Ali Milani. We now turn to an ongoing story regarding the European clash between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Aston Villa. This has been a story that has been on the front pages of newspapers and in Parliament, and it started with the West Midlands police banning Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from attending the European game as they said that they were not confident that they could police the game safely. At times, it feels like I've been in a bit of a parallel world with the way that this has been discussed. But joining me now is Ellis Cashmore, Professor of Sociology and author of Sport and Crime, to discuss the events of the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters ban. Mr. Cashmore, thank you so much for joining us. Can you start
My pleasure, Ali.
Thank you. Can you start off by just giving us your insight? Do you think the West Midlands police made the right call initially with the ban on the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters?
No, is my blunt answer. I think that they were quite correct in discussing the showdown and the possible repercussions and seeking advice from as many parties as they possibly could. And obviously they came to the conclusion that this was going to be an extraordinarily difficult game to control. In which case, rather than just throw in the towel and say, well, we will ban the visiting fans, they could have solicited the help of adjacent police forces in, for example, Staffordshire or Warwickshire or West Mercia, or consulted elsewhere, and in an effort to provide a safe environment for football fans. Instead of that, they simply said, well, we think the easiest option, perhaps I'm putting words in their mouth when I say easiest option, perhaps the easiest option for them was to say, well, we'll ban the Maccabi fans from coming to Villa Park, and that's the end of the argument. Well, of course, it wasn't the end of the argument. It was the start of an altogether bigger argument, because a lot of people were quite understandably upset by this decision. It seemed as if it was a extraordinarily bad advertisement for the city. We couldn't even police a football game. And the government has stepped in and said that they will examine this situation with a view to lifting the ban. Now, in the interim, it gets slightly more complicated, because the Maccabi club themselves, obviously disgusted by all this, have said, well, even if we get the tickets, we're not going to sell them to our own fans. And that won't go down too well with UEFA, that is the governing organization who administers the entire competition.
Well, Mr. Cashmore, let me ask you about this, because you've said it's not a great advertisement for the city. This isn't the first time that European away fans have been denied entry into a game because the police haven't felt like they can keep them safe. In fact, it's not even the first time Villa Park hasn't had European away supporters.
No, but it doesn't happen as a kind of a habitual thing, Ali, does it? I mean, it's hardly a regular occurrence.
But it's also not
there is a context here.
Yeah,
and
Mr.
obviously,
Cashmore, if I may.
This is due to take place in a city where there is 30% Muslim population. And so it was political from the outset. The police, of course, are saying, well, this was just a practical decision, and it wasn't based on the politics, whether local or national, but or international, I should say. But clearly it is, because had it been held elsewhere, I don't think it would have received quite the same kind of reception.
I mean, you might not think that, but there's also no evidence that that's the case. The Guardian has reported that police intelligence told them that the reason why this happened has nothing to do with what you just said in terms of Muslim supporters or Muslim city. That's not even in what the police intelligence have said. It's as a result
Well,
of
we don't know that, Ali, because we don't know what the intel is.
Well, the Guardian has reported that the police has told them the scores of this was as a result of extreme Maccabi fans with a past history of violence, shouting racist taunts, randomly attacking people in Amsterdam. They did consult with the Dutch police, who told them that the Maccabi fans had instigated
that is contentious,
trouble.
Ali. First of all,
I'm telling you what the
I'm telling you what the police would release intel.
Well,
to
they
the
have
Guardian,
to the Guardian.
First of all.
So are the Guardian
lying? The
lying?
second point about the Amsterdam.
Well, are you saying the Guardian is lying?
Is that first-hand reports suggest quite a different perspective than the one that you're giving.
Well,
it wasn't rampaging.
Well, that's not what the Dutch police have said.
From Israel, but Amsterdam fans that
no, that's not what
began the aggression.
No, that's not true, Mr.
And I don't know because I wasn't there.
Well, that's not true. That's not what the Dutch police have said in
this
case.
You don't know what's true and what isn't really. Neither do I.
Well, I know what the Dutch police have said. I know what the British police have said.
Well, if you
what
accept police versions of events, but I don't always do that.
Yes, but in this case, when the police and the Dutch police have all come to the same conclusion and said that this is as a result of a...
yes, if you accept the Dutch police's account.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, earlier you also suggested that the Guardian...
I usually try and take a cynical approach to these kind of things and question as many perspectives as I possibly can. And as I say, and with due respect to you, by the way, and, you're perfectly entitled to accept the official version, but I believe in looking further afield.
So I guess it's the allegation from you that the Guardian, the Dutch police, and the West Midlands police are lying?
I didn't say lying.
Well, earlier
I said they'd taken the easy option.
Well, earlier you told me...
I didn't say the Guardian had taken the easy option either. So let's be careful about the words we choose. I said I find it highly improbable that the West Midlands police would share intel with the Guardian. So if they do have intel, it's usually highly confidential and they don't share it with anybody. That's why it's intel, of course.
Well, if you're doubting whether they have shared this intel and the Guardian are explicitly saying that police intelligence has told them these things, then someone's lying.
Or being misled.
Okay. Look, let's go back to my concerns with what you said about the Muslim population. You said that, the 30% Muslim population in Birmingham was a factor, and you suspect if this was held in a different city, this wouldn't be the case. Do you have any evidence for that?
No.
Do you not think it's
pure conjecture?
Do you not think?
I do think, though, that it's at least a plausible scenario that during the deliberations that went on last Friday, that someone somewhere has suggested that the context is all important here. And the context, or a big factor in the context, is the demographic composition of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can I ask you this? Given that you have
down to is that there are a lot of people who feel quite understandably very angry at what's been going on in Gaza over the past 2 years,
sure,
and will want to vent their anger on visiting Israeli fans.
Sure, but given that we don't have any evidence
you're
for
going
that,
to ask me for evidence of this, and I have no evidence. I use common sense.
Okay,
and I think it would be highly implausible if you did not think that many Muslims in the city of Birmingham are incredibly angry at what's been going on in Gaza, as Muslims are across the world. So it would be, I don't think, tenable of you to argue otherwise.
No,
so,
look,
but I mean, contest it with me if you wish.
No,
but that's what but I believe that would have been a factor in the deliberations.
No, the anger of the Muslim community is, of course, not contested, but whether there is any credible intelligence that is going to lead to violence in any way, shape or form, we don't have any evidence for that.
No.
The West Midlands Police haven't said that.
It's
so my question to you, sir, would be, given that you have no evidence and you've admitted you have no evidence on this, is it not entirely dangerous, given the rise of Islamophobia in this country, to slander an entire community by suggesting...
Excuse me, I'm not slandering anyone.
Well, you're suggesting that their religion makes them more...
anger. What's wrong with that?
What you're also suggesting, are you not? Or correct me.
Slur against anyone or any group.
If you're suggesting,
I said it's an understandable anger.
Yeah.
How can you take issue with that,
Well, I
Ali?
take issue with the fact, not the understandable anger, but with the fact that you might be suggesting, you may not be, correct me if I'm wrong, that because this city was 30% Muslim, there is a higher likelihood that violence would take place at this game, and you didn't believe that that would be the case in other cities. That is, of course,
And I will
slandering an
correct you
entire
then. That is
community.
not what I said.
Okay, well, that's
I
good.
said that that was probably, and as I say, the meetings that took place with the West Midlands Police and Aston Villa Football Club and the Safety Advisory Panel were confidential. So I am not privy to them. But you asked me to try to sketch, to imagine the kind of discussions that took place in the sanctum meeting, and I would be astonished if the feature of the present context did not figure in their deliberations. I would find that unimaginable, and I think you would also.
Well, okay, let's talk about what happened over the weekend in what seemed like pretty ironic timing. The game between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Hopel was postponed, or I don't know if it's been cancelled or postponed as a result of violence. We've spoken a lot about the population of Birmingham, the West Midlands Police. You haven't so far touched in great detail the history of this specific football club and their fans in terms of violence. We saw it in Amsterdam. We've now seen it in Tel Aviv itself.
You haven't asked me.
Well, that's what I'm asking you now. Do you not think that away from the community dynamics, away from Gaza, this football team specifically has a serious issue with extremist fans and hooliganism?
Well, I did anticipate that you may raise this question, and so I did try to investigate it a little further and try and get some first-hand witness reports. And I'm afraid they are contested again. I cannot find a definitive answer to what happened, because although the official version was, as it usually is, that the fans provoked the aggression, and it was their fault.
You're talking about the Tel Aviv game here?
There are other conflicting accounts that say the police provoked it.
Where is this, in Tel Aviv or in Amsterdam?
It pays your money, takes your choice.
Which one are you talking about here, Tel Aviv or Amsterdam?
The Tel Aviv game.
Okay, well, Israeli...
You wanted me to talk about the most recent
Correct. No.
one.
Yeah, I'm with you. So
that was plus, Ali, let's not forget that was a local derby. That was like, Aston Villa and Birmingham City, where there is always a potential for conflict. Not so much in England nowadays, because football has become rather domesticated over the past
we do also
20
have our
years. But elsewhere in Europe and elsewhere in the world, local derbies are usually quite aggressive affairs.
Yeah, I mean, you say it's contested, but Israeli media themselves did say that the violence was instigated by both sets of fans, both Hopel and
As I say,
Maccabi Tel Aviv.
I don't know.
Okay, so the Guardian are wrong, the West Midlands police are wrong, the Dutch police are wrong, the Israeli media is wrong, the Tel Aviv police are wrong, but you're right.
I would not want to think that particular game had any effect. It has an effect on the way people are perceiving the Villa game, but I think it was unrelated. It was independent of the deliberations that went on last Friday.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Because obviously they didn't know.
Thank you so much, Professor Ellis Cashmore, for joining us. I appreciate your time and insight on this. Still to come, we'll be speaking to Tom Allingham from Save the Student to discuss the government's plan to increase university tuition fees, but we'll also cover student poverty and the difficulty with student finance broadly after this. Students have been back in the news this week as the government is expected to, or has announced that tuition fees will rise with inflation. Joining me now is Tom Allingham, student finance expert from Save the Student. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. Talk to me a little bit about the government's announcement. What does it mean for students around the country?
Yes. So what they've announced is that for the next 2 years, tuition fees are going to increase with forecast inflation. Right now, we don't know exactly how much that will be, although I think based on current projections, it will be around £400 in the next academic year. And then after that, they're looking to tie it to the quality of teaching. So there's something called the TEF, the Teaching Excellence Framework, which basically assesses the quality of teaching at universities. So what they're hoping to do is after the next 2 years, then it'll be tied to teaching. So unless a university is providing a good quality of service, then they won't be able to charge the highest level of tuition fees allowed.
So this is full-on market forces within higher education, really, where if some the TEF, which I'm very familiar with because I spent 2 years as vice president of NUS, if it and other factors, I guess, deem that you're good enough at your course, you can charge more, and if you're not, you charge less. Am I right in that assessment?
Yes, yeah, that does seem to be it. And I should add as well, sorry, inflation will be, or projections of inflation will be used to calculate fee increases for the next 2 years. Once that kind of TEF aspect comes into it as well, there'll still be an inflation increase in fees.
Oh, even if so that I guess that teaching quality framework is separate to inflation, so everybody's fees can go up with inflation, right?
I believe the cap will increase. I believe, and I'm not quite sure on the detail on this, but I believe it will only be those who are deemed to be good enough through the TEF system who will be able to charge the new cap.
Okay, my gut tells me, and correct me if I've got a little bit of bias here, but I almost definitely do, that means places like Oxford and Cambridge and stuff will be charging the most, and other I won't name the bottom universities because they'll at me on Twitter. They'll be charging less, right?
Yes.
Is that a reasonable
not necessarily
expectation?
The bottom in terms of rankings, but yeah, in terms of the quality of teaching, yes.
Yeah, which just will create a further unequal system in our university education, no?
You could argue that definitely, that, obviously tuition fees will, in all likelihood, and they may even confirm this, still be covered in full by a tuition fee loan. So, in theory, students from poorer backgrounds will still be able to go to university charging the highest fees, but that doesn't account for the psychological factor that if you do come from a poor, debt-averse background, you might see that a university is charging more than another and think, well, I'm going to go to the one that's cheaper because I can't afford it.
It's a shame. We had a candidate at one point for the Labour Party leadership that said he wanted to scrap tuition fees. I don't know whatever happened to him. His name was Keir Starmer. I don't know if he ever made it, the poor kid. But we're now getting rises to tuition fees, contrary to that promise. You've given us good detail about what this is. How do you feel about it?
We're conflicted for a few reasons. I should put it out there straight away, we are against tuition fees. We believe they should be abolished, and we're very aware that universities needed more money, that lots of them were running at a severe deficit, were in danger of going under. But we wanted the government to increase the grant funding that they give to universities rather than put the extra burden on students. All of that being said, I am very, very keen to not scaremonger and not, allow students or prospective students in particular to believe that this additional tuition fee is suddenly going to make it impossible for them to go to university, or is suddenly going to be a huge burden on them when they graduate. In the grand scheme of things, it's not, well, it won't make any difference to the amount they repeat each month as a graduate. That's only affected by how much you earn. And an extra £400, for instance, on top of your overall student debt, by the time you get to repaying it in full, if you ever get to that point, is likely to be a month or two. Now, I should say with all of that, we wish student debt was a lot lower. We wish tuition fees didn't exist, but let's treat it for what it is and not for what it isn't.
Yeah, if I can ask you about higher education in general, because it seems like there's a little bit of a bashing with higher education now, because we had at Labour Party conference, the government announced they're going to scrap the target of getting, I think, 50% of people in higher education, and instead they're going to focus more on apprenticeship, which isn't a terrible idea, but it definitely does remove some of the thrust on people going into higher education and instead going into apprenticeship. We're now seeing higher rises in tuition fees as well. Does the sector, I mean, we've also got international students numbers down because of the crackdown on visas and other things. Does the sector feel like it's under a little bit of attack?
I think the sector's been under attack for a long time. I think particularly over the past 10, 15 years or so, it's become a real culture war hot point. And I think, obviously, as you say, it's great that the more emphasis might be put on things like apprenticeships and stuff. But I don't want it to become a two-tier system where suddenly, because I think this point being
you
made.
Also don't need to bash one to encourage the other, do you? You don't need to go. You don't need to say less people should go to university. You can just say we should make apprenticeships as valued and as important and as well funded, et cetera, et cetera.
And that's exactly the point. And I think it's a point that's been made before, which is, it's not often when these points are made, the kind of bit that they don't say is, it's not going to be the kids from the highest paid or the highest income backgrounds who we want to go to apprenticeships. What we want is people from, other backgrounds to start doing more apprenticeships and stop going to university. And that's, I think, what we need to avoid, to kind of go back to a system where it's a bit more kind of deeply entrenched in class backgrounds.
Okay. Tom, I spent many years in student politics. right? And I was on the left. I was a big free education guy. So for a moment, you're going to give me a second. I'm going to go into the body of one of my right-wing opponents at NUS, and I'm going to give you their position, right? So what they would have said to me back then, and will probably still say, is that tuition fees aren't real debt insofar as you only pay it back when you get a job and you earn over a certain amount, and that we should really be focusing on student poverty in education, things like maintenance grants and maintenance loans and things like that, and that the tuition fees is actually more of a graduate tax than anything else. I feel a little bit sick saying that out loud, but you answer that question.
So my riposte to that would be, I agree with some of it and don't agree with other parts of it. The part I do agree with is that, again, we don't like tuition fees, but they often grab the headlines. They're not the issue that really, as you will know, affects students on the ground. The point about student poverty whilst they're at university is bang on.
Yeah.
Our surveys, among many, many others, point to the fact that over the past 5 or 6 years, maintenance loans have fallen far, far short of living costs, particularly during the cost of living crisis. It's now the norm for there to be food banks on campuses, students to be skipping meals, students to be dropping out of university due to money concerns. All of this stuff is absolutely accurate. And that's why, to be honest, the main disappointment for me in what the government announced was the fact that maintenance loan increases are still only going to be tied to projected rates of inflation, which was announced as if it was a new initiative, a good new initiative. It's actually the same system that's been in place for over a decade now. It's not been good enough. It's what's led to the situation we're in. And that, for me, was the real disappointment in what they announced.
But they also announced the reintroduction of maintenance grants, correct?
They did in very limited circumstances. So, it's only going to be by the end of the Parliament. So it's not going to be next year or the year after that, most likely. It's only going to be for students from the lowest income backgrounds. They haven't defined what that is yet. So let's see. And it's only going to be for students on what they've described as priority courses, which I think is what aligns with their industrial strategy. So again, we're at risk of creating a two-tier system.
Yeah, I mean, we also had, when I was there, we had this idea of the squeeze middle. So the students whose parents just got over the threshold of when you get the maximum loan or grant at the time we got in. Well, we just lost the grant. But that meant that they faced their own financial pressures insofar as they didn't come from sort of poorer backgrounds, but their parents weren't rich in any way, shape or form. So they got lower grants, lower loans, and they ended up being the crunch point. Is that still a problem?
Yeah, absolutely is. I mean, it was when I was at uni, I was probably in that squeeze middle. And actually, it's funny you say that, because in our latest money survey, one of the things we look at is how much money are students getting from their parents. And when we dug a little deeper into the stats this year, what we found was year on year, the income bands where students' contributions from their parents had fallen the most was those middle income bands. So again, it's the students in the middle bands who, as you say, their parents can't contribute a huge amount, but they're also not getting the maximum loan. They're also not eligible for the vast majority of income contingent grants either.
Yeah, look, me and Zoe, my co-host who isn't here with us this week, have consistently spoken about how our politics seems to have a bit of a disparity between, often we frame it as pensioners and young people in terms of political priorities. Because if you're a young person, and not everybody that goes in education is a young person, I should say that. I remember being told that multiple times by my briefing officer at NUS, but the majority of people that go into education are between the ages of 18 and 25, or higher education. That's right?
I don't know if it's the majority, but certainly I think it's the largest
the
single
plurality.
Group, I think it's right to say.
Yeah. But what they will have had is the impacts of Brexit, the impacts of international students, the impacts of tuition fees, maintenance grants gone. So they're really getting battered politically from all sides. Whereas, for example, when something like the winter fuel allowance happens, it's very quickly U-turned because pensioners kick off. Does there not seem to you to be a bit of a disparity in the political priorities of Westminster, i.e. the difference between how pensioners are treated and students are treated?
100%. And I think to go back to the maintenance loan example as well, routinely, so we campaigned on this. We campaigned on maintenance loans to have an uplift above and beyond the rate of inflation to make up for the shortfall because it had only increased by projected rates of inflation. And people would often come back and say, well, everyone's suffering right now. Why should students get this extra money? And what I would come back to them and say is, well, both benefits and pensions were increased at the rate of inflation. They weren't increased at projected rates. They were increased at the actual rate of inflation. So why shouldn't students get that treatment too? And I'm not, to kind of make the point that you made earlier, I don't want to bash one and, to the benefit of the other. I think all of these things should be increased at the rate of inflation, but students shouldn't be left out of it.
Yeah, we spoke about the triple lock last week and how the fact that pensions go up either at the rate of inflation, at wage increases, and something Zoe will kill me because she's told me this so many times, but the highest amount, right? So you're always guaranteed that pensions will rise at the highest amount of these things. Same thing doesn't apply for maintenance grants or maintenance loans or anything like that, right?
No, it is literally just projected rates of inflation. So as we saw during cost of living crisis, they were projecting rates of, 2-3%. And then inflation was at 11-12%, but loans were still only going up by a quarter of that.
Okay, now, you know how earlier I got into like the body of like a right-wing student activist? I want you to get into the body of, I've just made you prime minister or king of the country.
Okay.
Well, not king, 'cause you've become dictator of Great Britain, right? I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do for students. What would you do?
Okay, so number one, I would build more student accommodation. There's a massive shortage at the moment, which has led to increased prices and reduced quality, and students having to live, sometimes hours away from the university, in some cases in different countries to their universities, just to commute in to be closer to where they want to study. Number two, I would increase maintenance loans to catch up with inflation, and actually, if I'm dictator, I would increase it to an actual livable standard, which is probably double what it is now. And number three, I would reintroduce maintenance grants for all students.
And last question.
And number four, abolish tuition fees.
I didn't give you a fourth one. I give him dictator and it gets to his head. Do you see this? He took a fourth one. Tell us a little bit about Save the Student. Which student are you trying to save? Is it a specific one or is it all of them?
It's all students. We want to help all students make the most of their money whilst they're at university, and to give them some of the financial education that in many cases they feel they didn't get in school.
And how can people get involved? Do you guys run networks on campuses? What's the deal? I'm giving you a free plug here.
Thank you. No, we don't run networks on campuses. We are an entirely online business. We occasionally pop up to work with university staff in person. But otherwise, if any student wants to get involved with us, either go to savethestudent.org or go to our social medias where we are Save the Student on all the channels.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was Tom Allingham, a student finance expert from Save the Student, joining us to talk about the increase in tuition fees across universities, which also comes at the same time as a rising rate of student poverty around the country. We've had a great show this week. We've spoken everything from, what happened in my ear? Everything from the Your Party to, we had the brilliant Laura on to talk about the week's stories. A good joust, I would say, between myself and Professor Ellis Cashmore. It's a good name. I like the name Cashmore. Not quite Milani, but it's good. Around the story around Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. And Tom has just taken us through the increase in university tuition fees, and you saw me embody a right-wing student. So for all the Knowlesies and the organised independents in NUS, you got to see something that you only dreamed of when I beat you in elections many years ago. That's it from Politics Uncensored today. Join us next Thursday at 5 p.m. where we unwrap the week's political talking points, and Zoe will be back with you, so you can all breathe a sigh of relief. You won't just have me. You can stay up to date with the show by following at Politics Uncensored UK on social media, where you can find me at Ali Milani Live. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back and catch up at FUBARradio.com or via the FUBAR Radio app. Download it at your app store now. Thanks for listening. See you next week for another episode of Politics Uncensored.